Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is trainer education, and we're going to be discussing tracking client progress. So a little forewarning is we're using a new microphone today, courtesy of my brother. So he helped me find a new microphone for the podcast. So we've had people join the kind of patron part of the podcast where you can donate money to kind of keep the podcast going with the hosting fees and whatnot. And with that money, we decided to purchase a microphone so that way we could improve the sound quality. So hopefully this works out well and hopefully everybody enjoys it. If you do think this is a positive change, please email us, brutalironGym@gmail.com, to let me know. If you think it's a bad one and you think I need to correct this, please don't let me make a bunch of podcasts if the sound is wrong in some way. So let me know as quickly as you can. Again, the email is brutalironGym@gmail.com. So thank you to those who've donated to the patron part, and I sincerely appreciate it. And we're going to use the money to continue to try to make this the best we can so that you guys can get the best benefits from the podcast. So back to today's topic is I wanted to discuss the kind of like details and thought process and some specifics of tracking client progress. So when we have clients, we obviously want them to improve and do well. And there can be pros and cons to how we track their progression when we're working with them. And what I mean by this is kind of the sense that a lot of times you'll see people do like before and after photos online. And there are some goods and bads to that. So we also have people who use body measurements like Skinfolds, bioelectrical impedance devices, even just measuring with a tape measure. How do we know we're doing that stuff correctly? And is that the correct stuff for our client? So we're going to talk through a little bit about that. If you're listening to this and you're not a trainer, this is still extremely helpful in my opinion, is because you would want to track to see if you're making progress on your own anyhow. So this is what I'm going to definitely have this geared towards trainers, but if anyone is tracking or interested in tracking their progress, that's going to be a lot of the helpful information in this podcast. So the first thing we're going to kind of discuss is you not only want to track results, but you also want to track adherence. I'm actually a bigger fan of tracking adherence to a program than tracking results. And the reason why is often most ways of tracking results are after the work is done. So you maybe can track something, say, every week, every month, every 3 months, 6 months. But typically the person has to do days or weeks of work and then see if it worked, like if it resulted in what you wanted. And that, unfortunately, doesn't give them a day-to-day motivator. So they have to say, I have to do this, this, this. I'll check my weight in a week. But 3 days into it, what's their motivation to eat good? So it's kind of like it's too far and few between that they don't have that daily accountability, that daily kind of push to do better. Whereas when you track adherence, they can track that per meal of every day. So it's a continual accountability, not like a pressure, but more of like a continual accountability, like they can see if they're doing things right or wrong in real time. So all day, every day, they have the sense of what's going on. Whereas with tracking results, like I said, they have to do all the work first, and then you see if it worked. And they can lose motivation in the meantime. The other positive aspect is that if you focus on tracking adherence, it's more likely to create a lifestyle change. Whereas if you track results, if they just do some crazy shit that ends up having a good result, they're going to think that's the right way to do it. So whereas when you track adherence, you can say, hey, listen, I want you to eat, these number of meals per day. I want you to eat your meals in this structure. I want you to exercise per day. I want you to drink this much fluid, get this much hours of sleep. You can control more of it being a healthy lifestyle rather than just whatever worked to get the results. So that's another big one. And then the third benefit I like about it is sorry, I got lost in my notes there. So is, like I said, it gives them that accountability per day. It gives them the lifestyle. And then the other aspect is that it gets their focus on the right area in the sense that if they just do step by step, they can trust that the results will come. So it's kind of like if you aim small, miss small. You ever hear that concept? So if I aim small, I will miss small. If I aim on my adherence every day, the results will come. If you only ever think of results, kind of the pathway to those results gets gray, gets kind of fuzzy, and it's not always exactly what you want. And then if it happens to lead to a good result, unfortunately, those bad things get reinforced. So there's a lot of benefit to tracking adherence, and that's actually where I would suggest that all trainers, absolutely 100%, should have some factor of adherence being tracked, and that being the larger emphasis with your clients rather than tracking results. Now, we do need to make sure they get results, so you do have to track results as well. But too often, people only track results, and they don't also track adherence. So that's what I want to get across, is that you have to track both, and actually tracking adherence is most important. Okay? So, as for tracking results, we'll start there because that's what most people are going to want to start with. So we'll go there. So weight scale. So tracking your body weight on a scale. We had in way back when, podcast number 5. Okay, podcast number 5 is titled "Weight Loss is Not Linear." So there's a lot of pros and cons, and a lot of cons about tracking body weight. And one of the most common things is that weight loss does not happen in a slow, steady rate. So if I'm on a diet for fat loss, and I would check my weight on a scale, I'm not going to lose, like, say, 1 pound every week for 12 weeks. So every time you step on a scale, if it's, like, say, once a week, every Monday, you're not going to be exactly 1 pound different every single week. There are so many factors that contribute to body weight. So again, when you're tracking yourself on a scale, you're not tracking fat measurement. You're tracking just how much your body weighs, which includes fat, includes muscle, includes water retention, includes your hair, like anything that on you that has weight. It can even include like weight of food. So if you're tracking yourself at the end of the day versus before you eat anything in the morning, so that can make a difference. Even things like factors like humidity can make a difference in somebody's body weight in regards to water retention. If you have differing activity levels from one day to the next, that can change water retention, which changes your weight. There's like you change sodium amounts in your food, that can make changes as well. There are so many things that factor into body weight that it's not a great singular measurement of fat loss. So it's one of the things you can use, okay, along with other markers or other measurements. But a weight scale alone is not the best way to measure it, okay? So, can you use a scale? Sure, it gives you extra details. There's tons of positive information to it. But overwhelmingly, there's a lot of inconsistency to a scale, so you wouldn't want it to be the only marker of measurement, okay? So, when you do use a weight scale, the best ways to use it is going to be to have the person measure themselves twice a week. And the reason why is the more data points you collect, the more you can better analyze what's going on. So if they're only tracking once a week, that's basically like taking a snapshot per week. If you take 2, it gives you a little more details. So I prefer to have people measure themselves or weigh themselves on Mondays and Thursdays. And the reason why is Monday will give you, over time, you'll be able to see, like, compared like Monday to Monday to Monday over a course of weeks, you can see if they're making progress. So that does give you a snapshot of what they're like, what their body weight is. And Monday morning is a very good reflection of the weekend. So what they did Friday, Saturday, Sunday is going to factor into a lot of how much they weigh Monday morning. Whereas Thursday morning, it'll be a better marker of their habits of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So typically people do better during the week on diets because they have more structure to their day. So they're forced to get up for work. They're forced to do this for eating because they're so busy doing other stuff. So they tend to do very well with their diet on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You will then weigh yourself on Thursday. So that gives you a chance to see what is your weight after 3 really good days. Whereas Monday is what is your weight after 3 who knows what days. so they're going to do Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with a completely different structure than Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Typically, that's how people live, their work schedules and stuff like that. So what you'll sometimes see is from Monday to Thursday, when they do 3 good days, all of a sudden they're down in some weight. So maybe they're down a pound. But from that Thursday marker to the next Monday, all of a sudden they're back up a pound. So that tells you that over the weekend of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they probably had not very good habits if it made them gain weight again. So what you would want to see ideally is that the weight on Monday and Thursday is pretty similar. And we talk about in podcast number 5 that a 2% weight change is pretty common and pretty acceptable in terms of the window that you should see in changing. And you could argue that maybe it's between 1 and 2, but it's appropriate that there's going to be some change. So if someone weighs 100 pounds, okay, and they step on a scale and one day they're 99 pounds on a Monday, the next time they weigh in, they're back at 100. It didn't mean that they lost a pound of fat and then gained a pound of fat. So a variance of 1% for sure is absolutely just going to happen due to all the inconsistencies and the factors that come into play when you look at body weight. So what you'd want to see is, are they changing outside of that amount of range? That's usually going to be a sign of if they've lost weight, say the course over 4 weeks, they lose, 3% body weight. Well, that shows that you're definitely getting into some fat loss. If over the course of 12 weeks they've lost 0% body weight, then you know you're not getting far enough. Like there's no change going on. So weighing yourself Monday and Thursday allows you to see what you did, like how you weigh after 3 bad days on Monday, then what you would weigh on usually 3 good days on Thursday. You can track that and see. So maybe all the time on Mondays they're coming in super heavy, Thursday they're back to being light. That tells you that you got to look at the weekend and make sure they rein in their weekend activities. So that gives you a little more information. So also you want to have them weigh themselves in the morning before they eat or drink anything, but they can use the bathroom first. So I've had people tell me before, they're like, oh, I tried to weigh myself, but I had to pee so bad. And I'm like, well, go pee. What the hell? So go ahead and use the bathroom, but then weigh yourself before you eat or drink anything. And the reason why is like food and liquids have weight. So if we want to measure just you, if you put like, a half a gallon of fluid in you, you're going to be heavier just from the fluid, not because you're body weight or body fat. So you want to do morning weigh-ins after you use the bathroom, but before you eat or drink anything. You want to weigh yourself twice a week. Typically Mondays and Thursdays are best. And you would say, why not Friday? So because that gives you more consecutive days. Well, Friday is a rough day because it's more common that Friday will get messed up. So people go on family trips, they go on work trips, just like weekend events. Sometimes people take Friday off for this and that reason. So Friday is just a little bit more inconsistent in our day or our lifestyle than Thursday mornings are. So I found that Monday and Thursday are better. So that's kind of a good idea. So number 5, podcast number 5, will tell you more about the pros and cons of weight scale. But there's some good information to get started. So I do think tracking somebody's body weight is good because it does give you a lot of information, but it's definitely not the only marker you want to use. So other markers that people commonly use are body measurements. So for example, like Skinfold's bioelectrical impedance devices, which are like handheld devices that have like these silver sensors that sends like basically an electrical signal through your body. And then there's like foot scale ones. So basically how they work is if I'm like holding onto one, the signal is sent from one hand through the arm, across the chest, through the other arm, and back to the other hand. So that electrical signal takes the shortest pathway possible. So an upper body handheld bioelectrical impedance device actually only measures your upper body fat, and specifically the fat in the arms and the chest. So for females, it typically reads them much fatter than what they are because you have fat in your breast. So your breasts are made of breast tissue and fat and water, of course. But you're going to read with a higher body fat percentage because that electrical signal goes through your chest. So you're going to have higher degrees of fat in your chest than you actually do throughout your whole body. So basically that electrical device, it assumes that the fat between like the hand to hand would be equal throughout the entire body, which is absolutely not true. Whereas a foot scale, it goes from foot up one leg across, like basically your crotch and groin area, goes down the other leg and down to the foot. So again, it takes the shortest pathway possible. So that's going to read the body fat you have in your legs. So if somebody has more fat in their legs than they do in their upper body, a bioelectrical impedance device is going to read them as fatter than what they really are in the overall scheme of things. And same with upper body. So it's important to know that when you're using bioelectrical impedance devices, that it's not a true representation of body fat of the entire body. It's body fat of just the area in which the electrical signal goes through. Now, can you still use those to track progress? Yes, because those devices have a plus or minus 3% standard of error, meaning that they can, if you're 15% body fat, it can actually read you at 12 to 18, somewhere in that range, and it would be deemed that the machine is accurate. So, which sucks because that's an enormous range and that's a huge difference. So, it's not really super helpful when you're taking a single reading randomly. But if you use that same device and you use it, say, let's just say you did it every week, which would be overkill. But say you did it every week and you did it for 16 weeks in a row. Well, whatever error that machine has is going to be standard because you're going to be using the same thing every single time. So it's kind of like it might not be precise, but at least it's consistent. So that's what you're looking for. So if the first time you ever used it, it reads you at, say, 18. The next time it reads you at 18. The next time it reads you at 17. Next time it reads you at 16. Next time at 16. Next time at 15. And you can see the trending downward. Then you know, even though that machine might be flawed, it looks like you're going in the right direction. So it may be not 100% accurate, but it's consistent. So bioelectrical impedance devices can be used, but you'd also want to say use the weight scale. So if the bioelectrical impedance device is showing that you're getting leaner and the scale is staying the same or actually coming down, so that means, okay, I'm losing some fat and building some muscle maybe, but if the scale is going up and the bioelectrical impedance device is going down, it's very rare that you'd be losing that much fat but gaining that much muscle. So the bioelectrical impedance device going down would show like a lower body fat percentage, but the scale going up would show that you would be building muscle. It's unlikely that people do that at a significant rate. So that might be more like a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, 12-month style change rather than like a week-to-week or even month-to-month. So it gives you more and more information, but that's something you can track. But just know that the number might not be 100% accurate, but it's still maybe consistent enough that you can use it. Skinfold measurements are similar in the same way that in order for you to be certified to do skin folds with the best accuracy available to that device, it's recommended that the person has at least 1,000 times that they've measured people. So they've done skinfold measurements, and there's like 3, 5, 7. There's all these different types of numbers of sites on the body that you might use, and there's different equations that once you get the thickness of the skin, you plug it into these equations across the different sites, and it tells you your body fat percentage. So if the person has not done that 1,000 times, they're deemed to not be kind of certified in that, in the sense that they still have more to go before they would get good enough at the device that their reading would be considered as accurate as that device can be accounted for. Okay, so I used to teach at Winthrop University, so the local university here. I taught for 7 years, and I taught exercise physiology labs. So we actually did skinfold measurements, like all these aerobic style testing and everything like that. So I never counted how many times I've done skinfold, but it's significantly in the hundreds. I don't know if I've ever got to 1,000 or not, but it's high hundreds at least. And it's absolutely true that you have to do it so many times to get better and better and better and get more and more accurate at what you're doing. So if you have a trainer who's doing skinfold measurements on you, and I would just argue that it's probably not going to be super accurate. And then if you are a trainer that does skinfold measurements, please, please, please add a bunch of other stuff into your measurements as well. Skinfold measurements are not going to be very accurate for you. You have to do them, like I said, at least 1,000 times. And then even then, there's a standard error of 3%. So some people, like you'll see in data, like that there's differing degrees. So some people will say it has a 2% standard of error, some people has 3. So you'll just see a little bit of variances there. But it's not 100% accurate. So even if you've done it 1,000 times, you're still not 100% accurate. So it's like the bioelectrical impedance device. If you use the same device, there's the same kind of degree of inaccuracy, if that makes sense, but it's at least consistent. Well, if you're the same person doing the skin folds every time, maybe you do them in a slightly wrong way in some degree, and it makes the person 2% fatter than they really are. But if you make that mistake all the time, then it's at least consistent. So a lot of these measurements are going to have inaccuracy to some degree, but hopefully at least consistency. So over time, you will see a trending result. And then if you compare multiple markers together, so say you're doing skin fold measurements, body weight, maybe then you have like performance progressions. So you're testing their strength on certain lifts, you're testing their performance on maybe like endurance-based activities, and you're checking photos. So if you're doing all of that, you can see like a trending aspect, even if one or two of them is slightly off. So that's the idea, is to put together a lot of these, and we'll talk at the end about which ones are best, or like how many you might need. So the other thing we have is measuring, just using a tape measure across body parts. That is insanely inaccurate in many ways. So one of the most important parts when you're taking measurements for body parts is to have what are called bone markers. So if I'm going to measure, like say somebody's bicep, like their upper arm, I need to measure how far up the arm from their elbow bone, so the point of their elbow bone. So I might go from there up, say, 4 inches or 5 inches, but that's where I need to measure across the arm at all times. And the reason why is if you look at something like the thigh, if you don't measure how far above the kneecap, okay, a bone marker that you're measuring on the thigh, and you say, well, I'm always going to measure the thickest part. Well, we don't store fat in our thigh evenly. So every female knows this, is where do you have your saddlebags? Where do you have your satellites? On the outside, the upper outside, okay, right below that, like dip in the hip. So as you lose body fat, that saddlebag gets smaller, but it gets smaller from the knee up, meaning that like it gets more and more concentrated, whereas the cellulite in the saddlebag, say mid-thigh, will start to narrow down, but you still have that clump of fat on the upper part of the thigh. So if somebody always measures your thickest part, that area of what looks thickest will actually move. Okay? So as I lose body fat, the thickest part of my thigh might actually move up a ½ inch up my thigh. Then I do another, 2 or 3 months of dieting, it's another ½ inch up my thigh. So since we store fat mostly in our upper thigh, and it looks like we lose fat from our lower thigh up, is what it appears visually, that thickest part of your thigh is always moving. So you always have to measure off a bone marker. So I would measure, say, 6 inches up, or say 8 inches up from my kneecap, and I would always measure the width of the leg at that height. So that way I know I'm consistent. And then anytime you do torso measurements, you have to pay attention to the person's breathing. So if they're breathing in, when you get the measurement, that means that you're measuring the torso plus a full breath of air. Whereas maybe next month they breathe out, and neither one of you are paying attention to that, they're going to appear smaller because now you're measuring their torso without air. So there's a lot of inconsistency to measuring that people are completely unaware of. So they think it's one of the more accurate ones, but it's absolutely not. So I would argue that Skinfold, bioelectrical impedance devices, and measuring are all pretty damn near useless on their own. They have to be combined with other markers to be useful. I actually don't use any of them. I don't think they're accurate enough to even care. But that's a personal choice. So also I've been doing this for long enough that I use basically visual cues. When I meet with my clients or see them in videos, I can just see the changes I want to see. So I've helped people do aesthetic shows, like I said, to get pro cards, and I've been doing this since I was, for money since I was 18, so it's been 17 years of being a personal trainer. So I don't really like using a lot of measurements if they're not trustworthy anyhow. So I track adherence. And if they're a strength athlete, obviously we track their 1-rep maxes. If they're an aesthetic athlete, we just make sure they look good. So I know that that's not standardized. So I can't tell somebody who's learning how to do it a non-standardized way of measuring something. So you can't just say, how does it feel? Go by how it feels, or go by how it looks, because they don't have a freaking clue what they're doing. So you have to have some standardization to testing, so that way it's consistent regardless of who is doing it. So even though I might do something by feel, that's kind of a shitty piece of advice to give to you guys if you don't know how it feels. So you have to give some type of framework to somebody, and then over time they'll develop it, personalize it, and then maybe they can go by feel later. So the frameworks I'm giving you guys, they're intentionally structured so you can use them. And will you find out later on that there's nuances to everything I say? Oh, hell yes. And there are like little gray areas between things. So you'll find that stuff out. But for now, it's better for you to have some kind of standardization so that way you can at least know you're doing something mostly right. And then over time, you personalize it. So if I want to do a body measurement that I know is 100% accurate, it's called a DEXA scan, D-E-X-A scan. So DEXA scan. And I'm fortunate that where I'm located in Rock Hill, South Carolina, we're right below Charlotte, North Carolina, only about a 15, 20-minute drive-ish. And in Charlotte, North Carolina, there's a facility that has a DEXA scan available to the public. It's a really ridiculously expensive machine, by the way, so it's not super common that it'd be available to the public. But for $50, I can send a client up there, and they can get a DEXA scan. A DEXA scan is considered the gold standard, so it's as accurate as you're ever going to get with body measurement. A person lays on a table, basically, and the table is pressurized so they can tell your body weight. They scan this thing over you that shows the image of your body, and it can actually measure how much muscle you have versus fat in your entire body over quadrants of your body, like your left arm, left leg, right leg, torso versus extremities. There's a whole bunch of fun extra information you can get. But you can get body fat percentage, you can get weight mass of muscle, weight mass of fat, all this stuff. So that is the most accurate and by far absolutely what you should use. So if I was going to do body measurements with clients, whether if I had to pick between, say, Skinfold, bioelectrical impedance device, measuring with tape, or DEXA scan, or any other thing that kind of fits in that category, I would have them do the DEXA scan. And yes, it's $50, but whatever. If they want the results, if they really want to know, they'll find $50. So, and you would get that done every 3 months, maybe every 6 months. You definitely don't need to do it every month. So every 3 months or every 6 months is a good rate of change that you should be able to see a difference in the DEXA scan reading, the results. So DEXA scan is by far the best one available if you have one near you. So you can just type like whatever city's next to you, okay, wherever you live, and then just type DEXA scan. So if I was me, I'd say DEXA scan Charlotte, and you'll see like facilities that might offer that. So if you're going to do body measurements, DEXA scan is by far the best. The rest of them, give or take whether they're good or not, and you have to make sure you measure other things as well. So if I did, say, weight on a scale, I did strength progressions, and I did, say, skin fold measurements. Okay, that's pretty good, because that's one of extra detail. Or say I have an aesthetic athlete who's wanting to build muscle size. We would do weight scale to see if they're adding weight, which if they're adding weight, it's likely they're adding muscle. We would have performance progressions in rep ranges that are specific to growth. So maybe 30 seconds of time under tension, how much weight can they chest press, how many reps can they do? So that's like a body growth, muscle growth exercise and time under tension range. So therefore, if they improve in that range, it's likely they're going to build new muscle. And you can throw in measuring. So maybe I want to measure like the arms, measure the thighs, measure the calves. So if I do body weight, I do performance events, and I do measuring, all that helps me kind of put everything into context. So body measurements need to be combined with other things, okay? So the next one we have here is strength progressions. So real quick, I'm going to flip the video because it's about to run out.